She thought she was choosing freedom, until his silence taught her the price of what she walked away from. She stepped out convinced that excitement was worth losing calm. She called it bravery. It was an escape from responsibility. He had seemed steady and boring in her telling, but steady had been the backbone of what worked. She mistook his quiet for boredom and his loyalty for an open door. She left with a smile that ended clean, as if endings could be neat. She believed she was avoiding repetition. She didn't see that repetition in his hands was a foundation that lasted. At first it felt electric. New faces offered validation. New nights justified the choice. She let drama be proof she was alive. She traded long looks for quick thrills and called it living. But the seeds of loss are planted in tiny moments. A missed check-in, an eye roll, a dismissal of a simple kindness. Those small decisions stacked into a pattern. Patterns become truth, and truth writes consequences. He never raised his voice. He never fit her idea of loud love. His patience was a quiet currency she spent and took for granted. She answered his patience with impatience. She tested him the way people test safety, by pulling away to see if the rope would hold. The rope held. He kept coming back because he believed in the promise he once saw in her. She treated his faith like an experiment. She wanted to know where his line was, not recognizing she was drawing him into harm. There is cruelty in confusing kindness for weakness. She pushed boundaries until they blurred. She practiced disappearing, hoping absence would ignite pursuit. It did sometimes, and that success taught her to push harder. Small manipulations turned into habit. Habits calcify and become identity. She started to believe her own story, that she needed freedom more than she needed safety. Then he stopped proving anything. His persistence became stillness. He stopped arguing why he mattered. He stopped competing for a place in her days. That withdrawal was not dramatic. No angry messages, no confrontations, just an even, unwavering step back. It was a decision made quietly, armor formed from sense. He learned that love without reciprocity erodes the lover. He chose preservation over ruin. He chose to protect himself from the slow burn of giving into emptiness. When absence arrived, it acted like a mirror. She looked and for the first time saw what she had refused to honor. Late-night scrolling turned into reading old texts like evidence. Lines she once skimmed for comfort became proof of what she'd thrown away. Regret is not dramatic, it is patient. It sits in the corner and grows louder as the noise fades. This is not a story of punishment. It is a story of consequence. She left thinking she was brave. She traded a life that could have been built for moments that burned bright and died. The cost was steady love. The lesson: volatility can feel like passion, but steadiness becomes sanctuary. The choice was hers, and with it she learned what loss costs. If you're the man listening, guard your calm. Treat it like a standard, not something you trade. She called his calm boring and his steadiness a cage. She wore judgment like armor, believing drama proved she was alive. Where he offered quiet, she demanded fireworks. Where he gave reliability, she traded it for novelty. Her taste ran toward disruption. She thought upheaval meant growth. She didn't understand that stability can be strength. He showed up with the same rhythm every time. He kept promises small and sacred. He built a rhythm she could trust. She laughed it off as unexciting. She mistook dependability for a lack of imagination. She equated consistency with being unadventurous. It was easier to blame him than to admit she feared settling. Her loyalty was conditional. It hinged on how thrilling a man made her feel, not how whole he made her. She measured worth by spikes of emotion. Her barometer was excitement. She thought that meant she wanted passion, but what she actually wanted was validation. Men who stayed steady showed patience. She read patience as passivity. That misunderstanding cost more than she knew. She flirted with chaos to test boundaries. She called it independence. She vanished to see who would chase. She flinched when he remained calm. She wanted him to prove he cared by losing himself. But when he kept his center, she felt cheated. She wanted drama to confirm value. Calm didn't signal value to her, only frenzy did. There is a cruelty to confusing safety with suffocation. She pushed and watched what happened. He absorbed the hits and still trusted. She took that trust as given. She used the hands that steadied her like props for scenes that left him raw. She rewired her expectations around volatility. She believed the louder the emotion, the more authentic the connection. Quiet deeds lost their weight in her eyes. Simple disciplines, replies that came on time, a text that checked in, presence at an unremarkable night, were white noise compared to grand gestures. He never sought to be dramatic. He wanted to be true. He favored constancy over spectacle. That choice looked tame in a world that rewarded extremes. She chased extremes and called it freedom. She mistook the stage for life. He was building the life off stage. When patterns repeat, they become identity. His steadiness could have been her shelter if she'd let it. Instead, she made his habits the enemy of her narrative. She rewrote him into someone who bored her instead of a man who outlived seasons. That rewrite let her walk away with certainty, even though certainty was a lie she told herself. Regret doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in quiet rooms. She'd think about the man who answered simply, who steadied without fanfare. She'd remember the nights she demanded feeling and forgot the nights she needed rest. This wasn't about punishment. It was about consequence. Labels change perception. She labeled steadiness dead air and then wondered why the air she breathed later felt thin. Her mistake wasn't liking excitement. It was mistaking volatility for value. When you prefer noise over nuance, you pay for it. He protected himself. She lost an anchor she once had. Remember this, stability doesn't dim your worth, it reveals it. Protect the quiet that builds you, not chaos that consumes. Guard it always. She treated his love like an experiment, probing for reactions, measuring thresholds, looking for proof that he would bend. She stepped back to watch who pursued. She dialed down affection to gauge appetite and then judged him when he answered with steady grace. Each test stole trust until trust felt spent. Testing feels clever until it becomes reflex. She ghosted for stretches, believing she was proving independence, but she trained him to expect absence. She sought drama over truth. She wanted visible pain to validate his devotion. He refused to perform collapse for her approval. Using love as a lab is cruel. Run the same experiment enough times and the result changes. He returned because he believed in constancy and forgave because he hoped patience might fix things. That patience turned into vulnerability when she required chaos to feel alive. She measured devotion by spikes of emotion, not by persistent presence. Small manipulations grow loud in repetition. She weaponized silence, tactical remorse, and timing. She would message then vanish. She would apologize and keep doors open. She staged little crises to see which priorities would bend. He rebuilt around her storms. Bending repeated becomes breaking. He wanted safety, not spectacle. He asked for plain truth instead of hidden traps. His requests felt like limits to her freedom. She equated boundaries with imprisonment and read clarity as control. She misread his steadiness as a lack of imagination rather than a conscious standard. As she pushed, he drew a line. His clarity was quiet but definitive. He stopped tolerating emotional sabotage disguised as autonomy. The rules he set weren't punishment, they were acts of preservation. When giving drains the giver, leaving becomes the only sane arithmetic. Testing someone is a bet against their character. You gamble that love will tolerate misuse. Sometimes endurance is praised as virtue until it collapses under strain. Endurance has edges, and he reached them. His protection felt like betrayal to her because she'd built that betrayal by design. The fracture landed where she'd believed herself safe, in the relationship itself. Consequences are surgical. He didn't erupt, he retracted. He didn't accuse, he redirected. He stopped proving his worth. That calm refusal spoke louder than any fight. He reclaimed minutes, attention, and dignity. Pain converted into boundaries, boundaries became refuge. Later she'd look back and see tests turned into fences. She'd notice the pattern had a price tag. The hard truth: treat love like a subject and it will learn to leave the lab. Respect grows from consistency, not from trials. Pull someone apart to see if they'll mend, and they might decide not to glue themselves back together for you. He became unavailable where it mattered most, inside. Not because he vanished from timelines, but because he stopped opening himself as a proving ground. Repeated misuse teaches an economy of care. People stop investing where returns are negative. Withdrawal isn't vengeance. It's a practical lesson learned after too many manipulations. Intimacy cannot survive as an experiment. If you keep grading someone's heart, you'll find them gone and gone. Remember this. It began as a small recalibration that felt enormous. He woke up one morning and the fight no longer seemed worth the price. Not because he had grown cold, but because he finally saw the toll of endless repair. The math snapped into focus. Give until you're empty, and nothing you pour in will ever be enough. That clarity arrived like a clean breath. He didn't make a scene. There was no cinematic exit or grand speech. He simply stopped volunteering himself as the solution to someone else's chaos. Actions shifted before words did. Where he once raced to soothe, he now held his ground. Where he used to explain, he let silence do the work. This wasn't punishment. It was an act of survival. Boundaries replaced apologies. He learned to say no without drama. He set limits with a calm voice and kept them. Those limits looked mundane. Less availability, firmer plans, fewer rescue attempts, but they carried weight. Consistency and boundaries taught what words never could. Standards are not negotiable. The change was internal first. He renegotiated his self-respect. Small decisions built a new spine, declining late-night chaos, protecting mornings for himself, refusing the emotional roller coaster for cheap validation. Those micro-choices compounded. They rebuilt him from the inside out. People confuse withdrawal with weakness. They mistake distance for indifference. But his move was strategic. He redirected his attention to things that returned value. Work, health, projects, friendships. Each received time previously spent rescuing a relationship that drained him. Productivity became therapy. Routine became refuge. Purpose filled the spaces abandonment had left. He stopped measuring loyalty by sacrifice. He no longer equated endurance with virtue. Endurance without reciprocity becomes a slow erasure. That understanding freed him. He stopped calibrating his life to someone else's unpredictability. He reclaimed his calendar, his peace, his priorities. The moment of turning wasn't a single event but a series of tiny refusals that summed into something irreversible. A missed call left unanswered. A plan declined. A late-night text not rewired into a negotiation. Each refusal felt small. Together they formed a wall that protected rather than punished. Walls aren't cruel when they're built to keep a person whole. People expect spectacle when a man leaves. They expect fireworks and fury. What surprised everyone was the absence of spectacle. He chose dignity over drama. His restraint spoke, louder than any rant could have. Composure proved more exacting than outrage. That quiet drew attention in its own way because it revealed something rare. Emotional governance. She noticed the change and misread it. At first she assumed bluff. Then panic. Then regret. None of those states altered his quiet forward motion. He continued to improve not to spite her, but because the space allowed growth. You can't rebuild while you're busy fixing someone else. He used the distance as a lens to focus his energy where it mattered. This turning point didn't erase the past. It clarified it. He kept memories but stopped letting them dictate his present. He honored what had been good without bargaining for what it could never be. Acceptance replaced bargaining. Acceptance healed faster than any argument ever could. If you're listening, recognize this. Protecting your heart is an act of courage. The pivot from pleading to preserving is the most powerful move a man can make. It's quiet. It's disciplined. And it changes everything. Absence doesn't hollow you out. It shows the shape of what you lost. When he leaves, the space he held becomes an exhibit of quiet mercies. Habits reveal themselves. Messages sent without demand, steady replies that eased bad days, the way he showed up when no one else did. Ordinary gestures become priceless the moment they disappear. She scrolls old threads like evidence. Lines she skimmed now read like proof. Routine sentences become relics. She notices how often he asked if she was okay, how he remembered small details, how his memory became a net that caught her. Those tiny commitments added up. They formed a life, not a highlight reel. Regret is patient. It seeps into the hours you think are full. You can stack plans and still feel empty when night thins. Between parties and plans the ledger opens. She rereads messages looking for a map back to what she ignored. Memory keeps receipts. Movement masks loss for a while. She fills time with faces, places, and noise. Movement feels like progress, but often it merely drowns the echo. Social applause distracts. What mattered waits in stillness. She begins catching glimpses of him in strangers. Not the face but the way someone listens, the steadiness in their tone. Those echoes sting because they are familiar in unexpected ways. A calm question at a bar. Presence during a small conversation. Those moments remind her of the life she left. Guilt arrives slowly and efficiently. It is not theatrical. It is plain arithmetic. She tallies the nights she chose drama over presence and the promises she treated like options. The cost is clear in her mind's ledger. There are receipts she cannot shred. She rehearses apologies she never sends. She imagines conversations that would require honesty and finds the timing wrong. Words can't pay what she owes. Reparation needs time, changed habits, actions that prove instead of explain. Friends notice the cracks before she does. They ask soft questions she brushes off. Pride keeps her tidy. It makes explanations neat. But quiet moments reveal the ledger. Pride peels away when loneliness arrives. He does not shout his recovery. He lives it. He invests energy where the return is honest. His growth is a steady climb, not a show. That quiet momentum becomes its own proof. Existence without spectacle can be the most damning evidence of all. When the mirror finally comes, embarrassment precedes anger. She recognizes a version of herself who preferred noise to shelter, thrill to steadiness. Shame and longing sit together. They make a private, heavy lesson. She tries distraction tactics. Travel, flirtations, curated photos. Each distraction buys minutes but not repair. Small triggers undo the performance. A song, a place, a scent. Those triggers reopen the ledger. Guilt morphs into a dull ache that sits behind every laugh. She watches him rise without spectacle, and that sight stings because it proves a lesson she postponed. The absence becomes a mirror that does not lie. In that reflection she sees choices clearly, and the cost of choosing chaos over care. Finally, he treated her experiments like static and continued building where signal mattered. She grabbed flings like appetizers, quick, intense, forgettable, thinking variety could replace depth. Nights out became research. Likes and comments became validation. Motion felt like progress even when it hollowed her. The men she picked shone briefly and dissolved under pressure. They told good stories but lacked the backbone for routine. Charm covered emptiness for a night. It didn't carry weight through inconvenient mornings. None of them offered the slow labor of steady care. They offered acceleration that exhausted her. Chemistry without consistency proved thin. Conversation stayed on surface riffing and avoided real stamina. She began to grade connections by headline appeal, not by how they held through small crises. Novelty's applause became her metric, while durability faded into background. Comparison cut deeper than she expected. She lined these new faces up against a memory she had tried to forget. The contrast was brutal when a man cracked under a minor test. Fragility masqueraded as passion. Her replacements exposed the truth. They couldn't anchor her restlessness. Attention became a currency she chased. The louder the praise, the lighter she felt. But applause does not shelter you. It delivers only brief warmth. She learned that validation leaves you empty when the routine arrives. The empty hours revealed the absence in sharp focus. Failure taught reluctant humility. Each disappointing night cooled her certainty. She started noticing rarer traits. Messages that checked in without drama, presence when nothing exciting happened, the willingness to sit through boredom. Those habits were scarce and suddenly valuable. She attempted to clone his presence with surface cues, similar jokes, similar photos, but mimicry failed. Words can impersonate warmth, actions reveal backbone. Men who sounded like him often vanished where steadiness was required. Authentic constancy is harder to fake than a confident caption. Hunting thrill after thrill sharpened a simple truth. Sparks burn fast, shelter builds slow. Novelty teaches taste. Consistency reveals character. That realization haunted her because she had exchanged a harbor for a wake. She now grasped that what looked limiting had been structural. Changing desire is messy. The pull toward newness didn't end overnight. She still flirted with escapes, still entertained possibility. But she began to score experiences by durability. Will this feel better tomorrow or only tonight? The calculus altered choices. The season left invisible wounds. Glitter didn't hide the ache. Yet those bruises taught clarity. Discomfort pointed the way to maturity. Patience for the uneventful, respect for the steady, hunger for what endures. Watching men who carried pressure calmly produced both envy and sorrow. Envy because she wanted that safety now, sorrow because she had dismantled it earlier. That mixed sting taught more than lectures ever could. Finally, fatigue turned into selectivity. Movement remained, but it became purposeful. She stopped sampling every thrill. She began to value anchoring over entertainment. The pattern shifted. Replacements ceased replacing when she refused to accept anything less than an anchor. She started recognizing red flags faster and stopped apologizing for high standards. Conversations turned into filters. She practiced patience the way others practiced habits. Little tests she once performed she now failed intentionally. Growth felt lonely at first, but it taught her how to look for anchors, not fireworks, and chose wisely. He left the noise behind and built quietly, brick by careful brick. Mornings became rituals instead of negotiations. He replaced frantic replies with focused work. Where he once rewound the past, he now scheduled progress. Fitness took shape as discipline, not display. Early alarms were his allies rather than obligations to explain. Time that he used to spend fixing a relationship he invested in craft. He sharpened skills so his value wouldn't depend on someone's mood. Small wins accumulated into momentum. A single consistent habit multiplied into confidence. He didn't seek validation from the wrong people. He earned it from results. He cleared his circle of distractions. Friends who fed drama drifted away naturally as his priorities realigned. Conversations shifted from gossip about affection to plans about growth. New rhythms required fewer apologies and more accountability. He made decisions on behalf of the man he wanted to be, not the version who adapted to another's chaos. Money and status followed quietly because competence attracts resources. He learned to let accomplishment speak where words once begged. Success was not a billboard, it was proof of redirected energy. He repaired his finances one responsible choice at a time. Credit to pay down. Projects to finish. Goals to meet. Progress replaced pining. The gym was not cosmetic. It was architecture for mental toughness. Each session reminded him that pain had a structure. You could follow it and come through stronger. Training restored trust in his body and in process. That physical routine translated to better choices in life. Muscle was only a byproduct of regained discipline. He mastered mornings. The start of his day stopped belonging to other people's urgencies. He boxed off sacred hours for focus and reflection. That ownership multiplied the hours that followed. Where he used to react, he now planned. That shift transformed chaos into leverage. He cultivated a work ethic louder than his feelings. Output became his language. Instead of messaging to be seen, he produced. The more he produced, the quieter his need to be noticed. Achievement became his message and required no follow-up text. He rebuilt identity by choosing standards and enforcing them. He set boundaries that weren't performative but practical. He declined time sinks without melodrama. That consistency sent signals far stronger than any explanation. People noticed the calm reliability and adjusted. Respect replaced the old dance of proving himself. He dated differently. No desperation, no chasing. He engaged only when alignment existed. Conversations started with content and clarity. He vetted values before investing emotion. That selectivity protected time and preserved momentum. He took creative risks and accepted small failures. Growth demanded experiments that sometimes failed, and failure felt cleaner than clinging to what was. Each attempt taught a lesson. Each lesson built a new layer of competence. Gratitude became a quiet habit. He recorded victories, small and large, and let them accumulate. Reflection became not a remorseful look back but a constructive map forward. He honored progress publicly through actions and privately through discipline. The man who rose did so without fanfare. He did not announce healing. He earned it. Presence replaced proving. Calm became his signature. When she watched from afar, he was not a project to be salvaged but a life properly tended. That difference is everything. He walked forward, unshakable. He became an echo she couldn't mute. She saw him in small gestures and felt the absence like a bruise. Public moments triggered private memories. The way he listened when others talked over her, the way he lingered on what she said, the steady rhythm of his replies. Those little patterns returned to haunt her because they were proof he cared without spectacle. Every casual encounter reminded her of the life she'd walked away from. A stranger's patient eyes rewired a memory. She started calibrating people against an invisible standard, him, and everything came up short. She tried to bury the comparison with distractions. Parties, travel, project lists. Activity masked emptiness for hours. Yet in quiet moments the ledger reopened. Tiny triggers became sharp. A song lyric, a street lamp, an old joke. Those fragments assembled into an argument she couldn't win. Social media became its own indictment. He lived without fanfare and that carelessness felt like accusation. Her feed filled with faces fabricating calm. She watched him through filtered windows of other people's lives and found his absence growing louder. Image after image failed to match the steadiness she remembered. Her friends offered platitudes that slid against the hush inside. "You'll meet someone new," they said. Their words revealed a deeper truth. She had traded an anchor for novelty. That realization didn't explode, it crept up and settled. At first she blamed timing. She told herself maturity would come later. Then she noticed patterns repeating in partners. Flashy beginnings, brittle middles, sudden exits. The men she chose could create sparks but not keep fires lit. She had become allergic to the very patience that builds a home. Facing that pattern meant confronting herself. She owned the tests, the vanishings, the manipulations. Confession lived inside her thoughts where she rehearsed apologies she didn't send. Recognition was its own kind of suffering. It forced a reckoning that prosecutors couldn't provoke. The facts were hers. Guilt is not dramatic. It is a quiet erosion. It shows up as hesitation when she smiles, as a falter when asked about her past. It keeps company with late nights that end with scrolling in silence. Guilt organizes itself into a rhythm of small regrets. She began to notice the difference between spectacle and substance. Flashy men required constant proof. Steady men proved themselves daily in habits. That realization was both humbling and infuriating. Humbling because she had misread value. Infuriating because the cost was already paid. As weeks turned into years, the memory became a measuring tool. She compared new voices to his cadence, new gestures to his patience. The pile of near misses grew heavy. Each mismatch added weight to an invisible suitcase she carried. One evening she watched him in a social clip and felt the world right itself for a second. He wore calm like a coat. People flowed around him without disturbance. That sight confirmed what she had always had and no longer did. Regret settled into a steady ache that refused to be anesthetized. It was not theatrical. It was the small, persistent weight that changed how she moved through rooms and conversations. That ache taught her the lesson she had refused to learn. True value rarely shouts. It hums. She learned silence carries more testimony than any loud apology. When he went silent, everything in her world slowed down. At first, she didn't notice. Silence looked like distance, not strategy. She assumed he'd break eventually, that his pride would fold under curiosity. But this time, the silence wasn't revenge. It was evolution. It was the sound of a man who finally stopped negotiating for peace in a war he didn't start. She felt it immediately, the shift in energy. Messages went unanswered, not out of spite, but disinterest. His absence stopped being an act. It became a lifestyle. The man who once chased clarity now walked with it. He wasn't running from her anymore. He was walking toward himself. And that difference changed everything. Her power used to live in reaction. The tug of attention, the pull of emotion, the certainty that he'd come back. But silence removed the mirror she relied on. Now there was no feedback, no resistance to push against. She found herself talking to ghosts, composing texts she'd never send, checking his profile just to feel something familiar. The silence didn't punish her. It revealed her. She replayed their last conversation like evidence, scanning tone, words, timing. She wanted to find cracks that proved he still cared. But the quiet truth burned through every memory: he was gone, not hiding. When silence comes from strength, it doesn't echo, it absorbs. His calm became her storm. She tried to provoke a response. Subtle posts, indirect quotes, stories designed to sting. But silence doesn't argue. It doesn't defend, explain, or perform. It just stands there, tall and unshaken. That's when she realized attention had been her drug, and withdrawal hit harder than heartbreak. Meanwhile, his world expanded. His focus deepened. He wasn't performing restraint, he was living discipline. He stopped explaining himself to people who misunderstood him on purpose. His silence wasn't cold, it was clean. It wasn't avoidance, it was mastery. Days turned to weeks and the silence grew teeth. She started hearing herself more clearly, her patterns, her excuses, her pride. What once felt like control now felt like exposure. She had underestimated how loud absence could sound when someone stops needing to be understood. The same quiet she mocked became the quiet she missed. She used to think silence was weakness. Now she saw it was composure. The way he withheld reaction, the way he didn't justify his peace, the way he moved on without flinching, it wasn't detachment, it was authority. For the first time she experienced what it feels like to lose emotional power. Not through betrayal or anger, but through calm withdrawal. No explosion. No closure. Just a man who decided his energy was worth more than chaos. That's the paradox. The more silent he became, the louder his worth spoke. She felt his absence like a mirror turned inward. Every unanswered message reminded her of the weight he once carried for both of them. Silence is not emptiness. It's power in its purest form, the proof that he no longer needs to be seen to be sure of himself. She used to control the tempo. Now she dances to the rhythm of his calm. She's silent now too, but only because his quiet taught her what real strength sounds like. She thought the story ended when he stopped showing up. She didn't realize endings can echo. His silence didn't fade, it matured into a mirror. Every time she tried to move on, something reminded her of what she'd thrown away, not his face but his presence. The steadiness. The way his calm filled rooms without noise. You can't replace that with noise, and she tried, with parties, new names, new stories. But nothing reached that stillness. He stopped watching, stopped caring, stopped trying to prove anything. He didn't hate her, he outgrew her. The version of him she once dismissed became the version other people now respected. That's the sting, realizing he became the man she always wanted, just not for her. His distance wasn't revenge. It was refinement. Every test she used to measure his loyalty, he now used to measure his peace. He didn't react when she resurfaced. He didn't gloat when she peaked. The man who once explained every feeling had nothing left to explain. She called it coldness. It was closure. His life no longer revolved around who didn't understand him. He wasn't trying to prove he was enough, he was living like he already was. She kept expecting an emotional encore, some grand reply, some validation of her effect. But silence is final when peace is permanent. He wasn't missing her, he was missing nothing. The man who once second-guessed every move now trusted his intuition completely. He learned that walking away isn't loss, it's a declaration. His energy stopped bleeding into confusion. His time grew structured, his tone composed. He became dangerous in the quiet way, not by threat but by control. No reactions. No explanations. Just a steady pulse of purpose. She could feel it from afar, that unsettling calm that only men who healed truly possess. It didn't beg, it didn't flaunt, it just existed, confident and complete. She tried to rebuild her confidence by pretending she was untouched. But detachment looks different when it's genuine. His was rooted, hers was rehearsed. He didn't need to perform indifference, he lived it. That's the hardest part for her now, realizing his silence wasn't meant to hurt. It was meant to end a story that no longer deserved his dialogue. Every man she met after him felt smaller. Not because they failed, but because they lacked that quiet authority. The same silence she once called boring had turned magnetic. The same patience she mocked became the quality she now craved. Time has a cruel sense of irony. It reveals value only after you've discarded it. He became the kind of man who doesn't chase, doesn't argue, doesn't return. The kind that moves on without burning bridges, because he builds cities instead. His peace became proof that she was a chapter, not the book. And when she finally looked at him, not online but in memory, she didn't see a man she lost. She saw the man she built through her mistakes. He just learned faster. He used the pain she caused to evolve into something untouchable. That's how silence ends, not with revenge but with transformation. The man who once broke now builds. The woman who once led now watches. He doesn't need to say a word anymore. His growth speaks louder than her guilt ever could. Subscribe for more stories that show you how silence turns pain into power, and how walking away is sometimes the loudest move a man can make.